Okay. Welcome to Psych 8109, Storytelling with Data. My name is Jeremy Manning, and I'm a professor of Psych and Brain Sciences at Dartmouth. In addition to teaching courses on memory and data science, I also run a research lab aimed at understanding the brain network dynamics driving how we learn and remember. Really excited to be teaching this course for the fourth time, albeit in a somewhat less than ideal format given the ongoing pandemic. I'll be holding virtual course meetings at this Zoom link during the regularly scheduled time, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 1:10 to 2:15 Hanover time, with X hours on Tuesdays from 1:40 to 2:30 p.m. And then except for potential occasional makeup classes, we mostly won't use our X hours. But I do hold office hours on Tuesdays for a longer block of time that encompasses our X hours. And my office hours are by appointment, and you can sign up for a meeting using a link in the course syllabus that I posted on Canvas. I know that some students this term are not able to participate in the class synchronously. So in addition to today's meeting, I'll be recording all future course meetings, and I'll make all recordings available to you all. So we'll miss you if you're not able to attend class, but I understand that not everyone will be able to. Hopefully the recordings will still allow you to keep up with the material, and I have some ideas about how you can participate in discussions asynchronously if you wish. Also, if you have any privacy concerns related to appearing online, or if you want to bring something up in class that you don't want recorded, or even if you just want me to snip out some part of a class, just reach out and let me know, and I'll do my very best to respect your privacy and concerns. This is one of my favorite classes to teach because it's so different each time. What we cover in the course is going to be driven in large part by your interests and goals. And students often build off of projects that were developed in prior offerings of this course. And then you'll also help build up a foundation for future students. And if you choose, you'll get to see how your work this term gets used by future students. When I've taught this course in previous years, I've been able to incorporate collaborations with local nonprofits through Dartmouth's Social Impact Practicum program, if any of you have participated in that. I love the idea that data science can be used to improve the world and society. And that program has provided a really wonderful way of facilitating that. But sadly, this term, our partner organizations have understandably pulled out. We were scheduled to collaborate with the New Hampshire and Vermont departments of public health, and understandably, they're super overwhelmed right now. So instead, we're going to be kind of, we'll focus on bettering the world through analyzing some coronavirus data, and hopefully we'll be able to gain some interesting insights that could help us, understand new aspects of the pandemic. This course is fundamentally about using data to discover and evaluate truth. And we'll be learning about data science approaches to understanding data sets. And I've organized the course into kind of two main parts. So in the first part, we'll be building up our data science toolkit and learning how to tell stories about data. And then in the second part of the course, we'll be applying what you learned in part one to look at real world data sets and using data to answer questions about anything you're interested in. So after today's discussion, I'd like you to take a look at the videos in the introductory module of the course, which will outline in more detail how the course is structured, and also how I'd recommend like approaching learning in my course this term. And then please also check out the course syllabus. And then the introductory module will also help you to get set up with the tools we'll be using throughout the rest of the term, in addition to like Zoom and Canvas. I also want to recognize up front that this course was originally designed to be in person. This will be my second time teaching the course over Zoom, but there's an excellent chance that there will be some rough spots. So I'm sorry that circumstances aren't what we had hoped and planned. And we'll navigate this adventure together, and I'm sure there will be new challenges for all of us along the way. But I, nevertheless, I promise to teach you to the best of my ability this term. And I hope that you'll approach learning with a similar attitude, not only in this course, but in all your courses this term. Along those lines, if there's anything I can do to, better your learning experience, please reach out and let me know. Okay. So what I want to focus on for the rest of today is a discussion of truth. So to start us off, I'd like you to each think about something that you know with near 100% certainty. So maybe it's something you feel like so deeply and truly that you take it completely for granted and rarely think about it. Or maybe it's something you can't stop thinking about, like a cornerstone for your mind that everything else you perceive and believe is built on. And it can be deep or shallow. Who's willing to share?
I can share.
Yeah, Nathan.
I know that like for certain that like I don't know everything. So like that's one thing.
You don't know everything. Okay. How does that like crop up? Where do you notice that? How do you define it?
Definitely like all the time. Like when anyone like points something out that like I didn't know, like I realized that.
Okay. Cool.
I can give like specific examples, I guess.
Yeah, sure. If you have some specific examples.
Like my friend was telling me about his like geography class and about different like distribution of resources in different populations, and like that was something I didn't like realize before.
So okay, yeah. So kind of the knowledge that you don't know everything is kind of your you're taking that as 100% truth. I think that's a probably true for everyone. Okay, yeah, we can start there. Who else would like to share something? Like, what do you think is true? Or what do you know is true?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking something more like a little more tangible or literal, like when I'm dehydrated, drinking water makes it better. And that's something I'm pretty confident in as a fact, because it's just been something that I've dealt with every single day of my life.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So dehydration is kind of cured by water.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of water is cured by water. Yeah. Great. Cool. Yeah. That's a great one. What else?
I have one.
Yeah.
I was thinking, and I was gonna say I know who I am, but that's the more I thought about that, the more I was like, no, I don't. But I do know that I'm not the same person that I used to be in a lot of ways, because through my own experiences, I feel like I've lived through it. So you can kind of be sure of that. But that's assuming you can be sure of memories. So maybe I don't know.
So when you say you're not the same person, it's like the like ship of Theseus sense, or like my grandfather's axe sense, or like, so in other words, like you replace one part and then like the handle remains of the axe, and then like replace the handle later, and now it's technically totally a new axe, just like our atoms are maybe being, I think, something I've heard, like our atoms kind of cycle through completely every 8 years or something like that. So technically no atom of you remains from who you were 8 years ago. Did you mean it like that, or like mentally, or spiritually, or yeah?
I think, well, there's that as well, like the biological side of things, but that's kind of hard to prove for like me myself. You can prove trend as a whole, but I do know that like some of the actions I've taken in the past I wouldn't take today. I'm pretty positive of that, and that's because of like experiences I've had in, yeah, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Yeah.
Behaviorally.
I see. Yeah, so you could frame that as like you're a different person, because you are shaped by your past, and only the most current version of you has the most current version of your past. And then if that affects your behavior or your thoughts, or really anything about your existence, then you are like a new person from each moment to the next in that sense. Okay. But then you started by saying, I know who I am. But like, you got to change that to like, I don't know who I am, or like I'm different. I was trying to reconcile those two kind of framings.
Yeah, when I was thinking I know who I am, then I thought about like the Milgram experiment and like all of those studies that show that people who don't expect themselves to do terrible things do terrible things. So I didn't want to say that I know exactly who I am, because I know a lot of the time we have an idea of ourselves that doesn't actually come to fruition. So I changed that to I'm not the exact same as I used to be.
I see. Yeah, that's a deep one. Like, do you know yourself well enough to predict how you'll behave under circumstances you may not have experienced before? Yeah. Cool. I like that. Yeah, that's a neat framing too. Anyone else want to share?
Kind of like a different avenue, but like I know how to do a headstand. And I know that I know how to.
You know how to do a headstand. Okay, so that's okay. Great. Yeah, so that's a nice concrete one. When you say you know how to do a headstand, does that mean you can do a headstand? Like, by which you mean you can do a headstand?
Yeah, so I definitely know how to do it, and I know that
if asked, you could produce a handstand or headstand, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to share?
I also have one that's like more concrete, but I know that I'm allergic to mangoes.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And like, you don't have to share it. Do you know like the mechanism or anything like that? Or is it like, or you just like, yeah.
The oil on the skin.
Oil specifically.
Like if I come into contact with it, I get like
okay,
something that looks like poison ivy all over.
Yeah. Aren't mangoes and poison ivy are related, right? I think.
Yeah, and like cashews.
So cashews too. Huh. I didn't know cashews. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, not cool. Unfortunate, because mangoes are delicious, but cool. Cool from a knowledge acquisition standpoint. Yeah. Huh. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Isha or Kiara, do either of you want to share? You don't have to.
I can. I was thinking a fact or a truth would be like that I'm a Dartmouth student taking classes.
You are a Dartmouth student taking classes. Okay.
And I was thinking more about like my identity. Like I know like who my parents are. I know who my sister is. For like 100.
So you know who your family is. Yeah. Yeah, great. Interesting. Okay, yeah, these are all great. Yeah, so wide range of like, you know, of a like concrete versus abstract spectrum there. And yeah, and that's great. Okay, so think those thoughts. And then next, I want you to think about how you know those truths. So like, did you observe? So like, did you observe these things with your own senses? Did someone you trust absolutely tell you? Did you like get to the truth through logic, like, you know, Descartes, like, I think, therefore I am. In other words, like, how did that truth get into your brain? And like, what are its dependencies? So like, what else has to be true in order for these things that you know to be true? If you
This is kind of I feel like my example is kind of simple, but like to know that I can do a headstand, I have to like rely on like the English definition of the word headstand, and I guess like my understanding or like perception of that word. And then I don't know, it gets so confusing when you like break down all the mechanisms of what goes into it, because like I can physically do like what is defined and what looks like a headstand. But that's depending on like a lot of other factors, I guess.
Well, yeah. So there's like, what's a headstand? But then there's also like, okay, the way you, like, presumably you're maybe leveraging your memory of having done a headstand perhaps in the recent past, or at least in the past. Is your memory correct? So you kind of, you know, rely there on memory. Also, like, you have a perception of who you are, but you could just be a brain in a vat somewhere. We don't know. So, well, I know, you might not know. No, I'm just joking. No, but we kind of make assumptions about who we are in that sense too. We could be a computer program running on some server. And then I guess we could think about whether a headstand means the same thing if it's in simulation or not simulation. Okay, yeah. Yeah, who else wants to?
I think for mine, which is being a Dartmouth student, a lot of like the components of that truth have changed recently. Like you don't have to be on campus, you don't have to see anybody that is also a student in person, like all these things that would normally be part of that truth. So I guess maybe it's just because a trusted institution tells me I am a student. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So right, because I mean, even a few years ago, being a Dartmouth student meant like you are physically on campus. You're like at the physical set of locations called Dartmouth, but now Dartmouth just exists in our heads and online maybe. I mean, there's still a campus. I promise. I, you know, can walk by it still. At least I think, if my memory is trustworthy and I'm not a brain in a vat. But yeah, interesting. But you got like a piece of paper or an electronic document saying you are currently enrolled at Dartmouth. You can like log into a website of other people who also think they're affiliated with Dartmouth. And so we think this is a Dartmouth class. Yeah. Huh, yeah. Who else?
For my example, I was thinking about what you said with like maybe like a trusted person told you this truth. And so I think that is what applies most with I know who my family is. Because like I've obviously like grown up with my mom and I know she's my mom from that and she's told me that my whole life, but like maybe I was switched at birth, like who knows? Yeah. So that's kind of
I mean, they can still be your family
yeah.
in, even if you were switched at birth. So that's yeah, but you have like a specific genetic definition in your head almost. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and then you trust your, parents and family that, they're telling you, like, when they say they're your parents, and then, or your siblings, they are. So it's like a, coming from a trusted source. Okay. Okay.
I think mine's pretty straightforward. Like my body kind of tells me, and then also confirmed by a doctor and like an allergy test. So
Yeah, so there's some like chemical, like they put like mango oil on your skin or something, and then
yeah, and one of those little prick things, and it just blows up.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so a physical test. So then you have to like, so the dependencies maybe are like, you trust, I mean, like they could have swapped out like jellyfish venom for mango oil, but yeah, there's and then there's like a lot of we have to trust that like the test works as we expect it would, false positive or false negative rates, all that. But okay, but kind of essentially though, you have like a physical measurement that you can take, and then your belief is like, if you take it again, you'll get the same result, a predictable result. And so this is like a trustworthy thing. Okay. Cool.
For mine, I was thinking like who kind of like one of the things that I think has come up a lot is who defines the truth in a given situation. And like, for example, the family example, it depends on how you define family. And like, for me, a lot of people in my family are adopted, and that's been like, my mom considers her mom to be her adopted mom, not her biological mom. So like, when I was thinking of mine, I was thinking of something that I'm the only person that could prove or disprove that, as like being the only person within my own, I don't know, consciousness, I guess. So that's something that like I can be pretty sure of, as opposed to like external, like trusting other people with the truth is a different factor involved entirely.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and in some sense, like truth is a very personal thing, because it's like, you can. I mean, we are our brains, right? That's all we are. So we can like interact with the external world, which includes other people, but in the end, the way we perceive anything outside of ourselves, it's kind of inputs from our brain sensors, and reality is a construct that's made by our minds. So it could be different for each person, and that means truth could be different for each person. Okay. Okay. Anyone else want to share something or thoughts on this?
I was thinking about mine, which was like the water example to solve dehydration. And the mango example got me thinking like, I think I know what water is, but like I think I know what comes out of the tap or what comes in a water bottle, but I don't know if people disagree, but I personally think different water tastes different. And then similar to that, I judge water by like the way it looks. But there's so many clear liquids that look like water that could kill me in like an instant or over time. So it just made me think of like the definition of like what exactly water is, because I don't really produce it. So it's hard for me to like explicitly define what the boundaries of what it is are.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's true of most things in, at least that I interact with. I didn't, when I eat a sandwich, I didn't grow the wheat and like grind down the flour and like, you know, I didn't like cut the wood to make my desk, or I don't know, wherever computers come from, magically distill them out of the vapor of, clouds, the internet. No, I didn't like grind sand up to make silicon or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Yeah, water isn't like necessarily like 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. It's like because if it tastes different, it's got to have other stuff in it too. So even our like chemical definition of water is maybe nuanced. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so these are good things to think about. Okay, so the next step here is I want you to think about what would need to happen in order to convince you otherwise. So in other words, like, is there anything that you could observe or see or be told that could shatter, like, your fundamental truth? Or like, is it beyond the reach of evidence? So like, what sorts of things could shake your thinking so fundamentally and completely you no longer believe, the thing you know most, or the thing you are completely convinced is true? Is it even possible?
I think that, like, I don't know. I think that like is, for me, like maybe like it's easier for me to like have that than another person. I think some people are a lot more like sturdy in like their beliefs of truth and like confidence in their own knowledge than like others. Like for me, for example, when I like start getting into like the rabbit hole of like, I don't know, something like what is time, or like I don't know, watching the Matrix and like being like, oh well, this could be a simulation. And then so like when I'm actually like thinking about that stuff a lot, then I'm like, well, I guess I really don't know what's true. And like that freaks me out a little bit. But then like for like almost like the complete majority of the time, like I'm not analyzing or thinking about that. So I'm not bothered and I'm not like questioning like basic truths, if that makes sense.
But how could you, that does make sense. How could you, like, so your example was the headstand. I mean, it's so like on one hand, like I like the concreteness of that example because it's like you could prove you could still do a headstand by doing a headstand.
Yeah.
But like technically what you're saying is like at the moment you made that statement, like you could do a headstand. So like, if you like broke your leg, I mean, sorry to be morbid, but like, and then I mean, if you're like driving in a car, you can't do a headstand because like there's no, or like flying in an airplane where you have to like keep your seatbelt on, like you can't do a headstand. So like you can't always prove that, but like, is there, like, could someone like, like let's say you're driving in a car and you're talking to the person next to you and you go into that car ride believing like I can do a headstand. Could you like imagine a scenario where just by talking, someone could like convince you couldn't, even though, nothing has changed about you, or like, in other words, like how fragile are your beliefs there, or even
well,
for
I
something
think
concrete.
the one thing that like kind of always gets me is like about like just like perception and like like I feel like very confident in my like my general perceptions of the world, just because almost everyone I interact with like shares them in that way. So like if I show someone I'm doing a headstand and like a lot of people like me are like, yeah, like that's a headstand, then I feel pretty confident about that. But then it always gets me when it's like, maybe I think I'm doing a headstand, but I'm just like not. Like I think I'm doing one thing visually, but I'm not. And like that's always possible. But I think just due to like the popularity of like shared perception on that, I would feel very confident. I think it would be pretty hard for someone to convince me otherwise.
There are these experiments of like, they're popular in intro psych classes like a lot of them were done in the 60s when like before modern IRBs were up and running. But like, so like, you go into an elevator and everyone in the elevator is facing the wrong direction. And, social pressure is so strong, you just end up doing something crazy. Or like all the students in a class will say, oh yeah, this horizontal line, like, so the teacher will draw a line and say like, is this vertical or horizontal? And it'll be a horizontal line, but everyone else in the class is like secretly a Confederate and says it's a vertical line. You can imagine something like, and then it's like, wait, is my whole reality warped? Did I mess up this definition? I think I'm pretty sure of. You can imagine something like that with a headstand. Like you do a headstand and everyone around you is like, oh, why did you just climb that tree? And then like, if that happens enough, you could get confused.
Yeah, I feel like that would also just be a really like extreme version of gaslighting. And like I feel like humans are very easily like gaslighted, and especially like, I don't know, like emotional situations. And I could imagine if I was in a classroom with people and I thought it was a vertical line and everyone was saying it was horizontal, or like whatever that situation was, like you would literally feel like you're going crazy. Like that's like terrible.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
Sorry.
just interrupted someone. Isha, yeah.
I think for my example, like the only thing that could convince me otherwise would be like my parents telling me that they aren't my parents. And like that again, like there's two definitions of like what is your family, like genetic versus experience. So like the genetic part, I feel like you could disprove that with like a DNA test pretty easily. But like my mom and dad have been like throughout my entire life, like those are the two people that I know, like in every situation, like that is my mom and dad. So it'd be kind of hard to convince me otherwise, unless like they said that they were not.
So you have a source of information that you've relied on to give you like kind of this belief structure. So unless that specific source changed its tune, your beliefs are solid there.
Yeah.
Okay. Nathan, did you have something?
Yeah, I was like wondering, I think you already like touched on it a little bit, but yeah, are we getting down to like what each of our words like means? And like if I say like I know like I know that I don't know everything, but like what is the word everything, that the word everything means to me what I think it means, but it might like not actually hold that meaning in reality. But then so I think though, like if you just assume that if you're just assuming, I guess, that it means like what you think it means, then like to change that, like there's a couple different things that could happen. Like one, maybe like I could like die, and assuming that like when you die you like lose all of your like knowledge and like brain power, then I would stop believing that, because I'd stop believing anything. Again, that's like assuming that that's what happens. Like anything could happen when you die, who knows? But and then another thing would be like if I actually did start, I guess, thinking somehow to like myself that I start like knowing like every single thing that came up, like I already knew, which again, not like a huge chance of that happening, but that could be a situation.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, so yeah, we can. I mean, how this breaks down is up to us. Like, we could start to nitpick the meanings of words. I think the more interesting stuff is like, the way, I mean, we have to communicate ideas in some way. So we have to take some shortcuts in the class to, you know, assume we are using a common communication framework, you know, for the most part, et cetera. But yeah, of course, we could distill things down further if we thought that would be interesting. But yeah, but at some point, you know, I guess if you, I mean, I think we could ask, like, could all of the knowledge, I guess we could limit it to humanities knowledge, could all of humanities knowledge be distilled into some, like a representation that could be like stored in your brain? And could that be put in your brain somehow, like downloaded matrix style, or learned over, you know, if you could live for 10,000 years, or 100,000 years, I don't know how long it would take. My order of magnitude may be off there, but you know, we could ask, like, is it theoretically possible to learn everything, or is like the pace of knowledge is expanding so quickly that no matter, it's like theoretically faster than you could possibly learn it? We could start to think about that sort of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Interesting. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah, these are some good ideas. So from a data science perspective, knowledge has to come from data. There are many ways to interpret data that could lead us to different conclusions. So like a data-driven approach to truth, which many of you kind of mentioned, like I could observe something or measure something or ask someone something. That's kind of like a data collection approach to getting truth. That's still fallible. And then there's also an additional complication, which is that the tools that we use to collect data necessarily give us incomplete information. So that's true in like the extreme sense, like in the Heisenberg uncertainty principle sense. But it also holds for any measurements we take or any data we collect. So one way of thinking about this is like when we're measuring, say, the physical properties of the external world, there's no way that we can possibly cram every bit of information about the thing we're measuring into a manageably small set of numbers. So like when you measure the length and width of a table, you're not also likely to collect information about like the molecular structure of the table, or even higher level information like whether it's made of wood or stone, or like what color it is, or whether your significant other likes how it looks. And then physical properties are often the easiest things for us to characterize and measure. So if you were to collect like data about people's feelings or beliefs, the best you could possibly hope for would be their own descriptions and self-reports. But then in like dutifully recording people's responses, you'd be missing out on fundamental things that you really need, you'd need to really know truth beyond any possible doubt. So for example, like a complete model of each person's brain and like maybe recordings of what every neuron was doing throughout each moment of the person's life might be useful. But then like storing that sort of data set is like beyond anything close to our capacity, and then like interpreting it would be a total nightmare. At the same time, even though our data sets are always going to be incomplete, we're not living in totally hopeless times. So like big companies like Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon collect huge amounts of data about billions of people, which is like a good chunk of who's on Earth. So at that scale, it starts to become possible to actually like measure the state of the entire population of Earth, rather than trying to like use statistics to make inferences from like limited samples. So there's some things we can measure or very nearly measure. But as data science newbies, like, what do you think about the strengths and weaknesses of like using data to get at truth or about the world? Like, are data-driven approaches the right way to learn about the world, or like, are there better ways, or what can and can't we know using data? And like, are those limitations surmountable through technological advances, or are there some truths we just like can't ever learn or know? What do you think?
I was thinking that like even with data, sometimes you're provided a lot of it and you can come to a certain conclusion, but you could be biased by other factors, which are what's leading you to a certain conclusion. Like one same data set could mean like one outcome to one person, person A, another outcome to person B. And that can just be affected by like our internal biases. So I think that like even if we are all looking at the same supposed like source of truth, I think if interpretation is done by humans, humans can just think about the same thing differently. Like we could have different perceptions in our mind of what it really means.
Kind of like going off what you were saying, I think like you were saying the data sets about from Facebook, a lot of like the algorithms themselves have bias in them against women and people of color in particular. And that's like also true in medical care. So for example, like what a doctor might think is true as like the best form of care for a given patient, the data that they're relying on might not be true for women or people of color. It might be biased towards what works best for white men. So I think that there's like a level, like you can get to a certain level of truth, but then there's always going to be some kind of nuance to that.
Yeah, that's a really important issue, like bias in data sets. And that could come from, yeah, so that can come from the data sets themselves. So oversampling or undersampling particular populations or properties that we want to know about or make inferences about. And then it can also come from the algorithm side. You know, it's hard to make algorithm, like it's hard to predict how an algorithm will be biased. And when we're wrong, it can have pretty devastating consequences. And the truth is that, well, okay, I'm using truth liberally there. In practice, we are never correct in how we define our algorithms and how we collect our data sets. I think the world is moving towards a nearly 100% sample of the population of Earth. And so as we move in that direction, it will be possible to use some statistics about patterns of, every population that exists on Earth. Once we finish collecting that data set, it'll be out of date because someone else is going to be born and people are going to die. And as you've mentioned, we all become different people from each moment to the next. So, it's not a simple thing, but yeah, I guess that's so. Yeah, it's really important to think about, like, data is not unbiased, even though it seems like it's like you make a measurement. How could that be wrong or problematic? But it is if you're not sampling fairly, and we almost never sample fairly. But then there's like combating that a little bit, although it has its own problems, is like as our data sets, data set sizes approach, effective infinity, there's less bias in the data set, but then bias gets introduced by how we process the data set, because you have to make all kinds of shortcuts to process huge data sets. This is what all the big companies are doing to make sense of their billion person data sets. Sorry, huge delivery truck just landed in my driveway here. Make it loud in a sec. Anyways, cool.
Something I think is interesting is like the way we interpret data or draw conclusions from data, and like just, I don't know, there's just as like data itself can be biased, like the way we try to tell a story to prove our own point versus like what's the true story. And then similar but also kind of different is just like correlation versus causation in data. So like the data itself at like a factual level might show that like, I don't know, more people buy apples than oranges at a certain store or something, and then someone's like, oh, people prefer apples to oranges, but like it could be that like the apples are cheaper and really people just want whatever's cheapest, and if the oranges were cheaper, more people would buy oranges. And so I don't know, that's kind of a superficial example, but that's something that I think about.
Yeah, but that's a great point. That yeah, so I think it has deep implications. Like what you think is going on, like the universe doesn't care what you think is going on. You know, the universe is doing its thing, and then we can make measurements and interpret and, you know, do our best. But so sorry for the noise. Can you all hear okay what I'm saying? Or okay. Sorry. Parallel courses going on here. Okay. So yeah. Oh man, totally just lost my train of thought. Oh yes, how we interpret data can itself, yeah. So the universe doesn't care how we think about data or how we interpret our results. And so that's another way that we can be misled by our own thinking or by our own kind of failures to like test fairly or adequately, or, you know, with enough depth. It's like on one hand, so if you take like Facebook or Google algorithms for like predicting which ads you'll click on, there's like one sense in which if what you're trying to do is predict which ad someone will click on, you can have beliefs about why they click on it. And that's where biases, like that's like the most dangerous place for bias to kind of creep in. But if you can accurately predict when like one specific person is going, like kind of chosen arbitrarily, is going to click on something, there's another side to it, which is often used as justification for creating biased algorithms or not thinking as deeply about this stuff as we should be, which is that like in practice, like how our predictions perform, like can kind of justify imperfections according to particularly like marketing executives and that sort of thing, can justify potential biases in the algorithms, because if you make accurate predictions, your reasoning may be flawed, but you've gotten at some pattern that seems to be borne out by reality. And so maybe it's useful in some sense. But we get into problems when we start to interpret like, okay, why is this true? And then we start to miss things like, okay, it's because of the price of apples and oranges, not actual, like people's actual preferences, or like the way we, like maybe people are always selecting the top choice on the multiple choice test. And so it seems like they're answering in one way, but they're actually showing a preference for something that we're not measuring or analyzing. Like it doesn't make it to the analysis side. Okay. Yeah, so yeah.
I had a question. Yeah, I had a question. This might be a little like crazy thought, but like when you start to think about how everyone's truths are different and like yours, like who knows if yours is true or not, have you like ever thought to yourself like, like why am I like what is the purpose of like being here on earth, and like what are we doing here, like what matters, like what are we, yeah, have you ever thought those types of things to yourself?
Have I personally thought those
Or
things?
or I guess, do people in general think about those things? Like, you don't have to answer personally if you don't want to.
I mean, well, I do think these things. Yeah, I think, yeah, we could pose the question to class. Do others think these things? Yeah.
I mean, I try not to get into, I feel like it's such a rabbit hole. So I think once in a while
Yeah.
it's a fun thing, but then sometimes it just like ends in like existential crisis.
I feel that.
I mean, what our purpose is, and you know, like you could also think about it as like, are you doing good or evil? And like morality is like, is that definable in a subjective sense? I don't know. You could ask different philosophers and you'll get different answers, but well, it's certainly hard to answer those sorts of questions in like a data-driven way. I guess you could ask something you might be able to do with data about, like, you know, to answer the question, like, do we have a purpose, you know, in existing or being alive? Like, you know, you could ask people what they think, and then you could tell a story about people's beliefs about their existence. People's beliefs about their existence or their purpose might be sufficient as, like, if I believe something is true, does it, I don't know, it only matters under certain circumstances whether it is actually true. And, you know, I mean, the way we perceive the world is like objects that are contiguous and we can interact with them. But the reality, like from a physics standpoint, is most of everything is empty space. Like if you think about, like, you know, models of atoms and that sort of thing. So we aren't perceiving objective reality, and you could, you know, yeah, it's that's tricky stuff. Definitely a rabbit hole. Yeah, interesting to think about. Okay, so okay, so yeah, so hopefully this kind of gets you in a mindset of thinking about data and questioning and thinking about what you know and what you don't know. So that's a good place to be right now on day one of this course. So what I'd like you to do next is to, like, think about the questions and ideas we've discussed today as you're working your way through module 1 of the course material. And in module 1, you're going to be learning from some of the world's best storytellers at Pixar how to tell effective stories. And so your first assignment is going to be like telling a story not about data, but about anything at all that you want. So it can be fiction, nonfiction. It's kind of a fun assignment. So as you're watching those videos, think about how you might use elements of effective storytelling to structure effective arguments. Or like, how could you use those ideas to formulate even effective questions about data? And then on Wednesday, so our next class, I'd like you to come prepared with questions or comments or ideas from module 1. And then let's see. So so at the end of the day on Friday, well, maybe we'll make it do Monday. Okay, so on on Wednesday, let's, well, okay, sorry. I have the wrong dates written down here, so I'm, okay. On Wednesday, what we're gonna do is, so for your first assignment, you'll be telling the story. And so what I wanna do on our next class is to, first of all, discuss like the material that you've gone through in module 1. And then also I wanna do kind of a brainstorming session where we kind of talk through story ideas that you have. And then for either, like depending on how that goes, for either Friday or Monday, you'll like put your story together and then we'll like, you know, finish off assignment 1 by making it into a complete story. But I'm gonna hold off on, it might be due Friday, might be due Monday, but we'll see how things go on Wednesday. And then, you know, your first stories can be about data, but they don't have to be. And then like the first assignment is gonna guide you through the process of telling a story, you know, about whatever you want to the class. So, you know, as college students, you're already experienced communicators, but like telling stories in a compelling way can be very different from, you know, everyday conversation. And so the goal of this first week and assignment 1 is to like give you some practice telling stories about things you're already comfortable talking about without being bogged down by like new data science concepts that we'll get to later in the course. Yeah, so on Wednesday, we'll do some brainstorming about like story ideas to get you going with that assignment. And then I'll also hold office hours tomorrow, which you can sign up for using the link in the syllabus to answer any other questions about the assignment or the material. Yeah, so on Wednesday, let's talk about any questions you have for module 1, and then we'll, you know, go through your story ideas, and we'll, you know, we'll kind of try to refine them and build them up, and, you know, probe them for weak points and stuff like that. And so I'd like you to come into class with an open mindset, where you're like willing to flexibly adapt based on the feedback and discussions in Wednesday's class. And I'm hoping that's going to help your stories improve, and then, you know, also give you some experience giving and receiving feedback before you've like fully committed to your idea. Okay, so that covers all the course content I was planning to get to today. Yeah, since we have a few extra minutes, I can open up the remaining class time for you to ask any questions about the content of the course, or about me or my research, or if you'd like to share anything about you. You know, whatever you'd like to talk about, you have up to 5 minutes if you'd like.
I just have a logistical question.
Yeah.
For on the syllabus, when you mentioned that like we'll be using Slack often, and or it's not even on the syllabus, it's just like the homepage. I recommend joining our Slack workspace. When I like click that link, it doesn't take me to like a specific workspace for this class. So how would I find that?
So
I don't know if that's just me or like other people.
Yeah, I had that problem too.
Interesting. Okay, I'll have to look into that. I'll make sure that link works. Yeah, Nathan, did you have something?
You can like type in like psych and then like it scroll down a little bit and it should come up. I like requested permission, but I haven't been granted access yet, so I'm not sure if that's the right one, but I think it says storytelling. So
okay, it's storiesaboutdata.slack.com. So if you go to that address, it should bring you to like a Dartmouth like login, and then you can sign up with your Dartmouth address.
Okay. Yeah, I also just was able to request to join.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, yeah, feel free to send me an email if you have trouble joining, or we can, make sure everyone's on Wednesday. I guess maybe, why don't we all try to click that link and join, and then if anyone has trouble, just let me know.
I think you might have to like
Yeah.
accept our requests. Is that right?
Okay. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yep. I think so. Yeah, so I'll go through and accept all the requests after class. So
So thanks.
sure. Cool. Okay. Anything else? All right. Oh,
What's your-
yes.
Everything on module 1 before class tomorrow or Wednesday?
On Wednesday. So I think, there's not going to be an exam on Wednesday. So it doesn't take too long to go through. It's like, watching, they're relatively short videos. I'm guessing it'll probably take, an hour or so to go through. So, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so, somewhere they're like 5-minute videos, so roughly 40 minutes to watch them. So, if you're able to, it'll be helpful to have that information as kind of context for our class on Wednesday. The videos kind of guide you through like, okay, what makes a good story? What are the elements of a story according to Pixar? What are some tips and tricks for telling compelling stories that other people find interesting, that sort of thing. There's no one right answer to how to tell a story, so you could probably get by without even viewing that material, but I found it helpful and I recommend doing it. But whatever you have time for, do that. And if you think it's helpful, watch it. If you don't think it's helpful, I'm not going to quiz you on it. So there's, it's up to you.
And sorry,
Okay.
I was a bit confused about what we should have done by Wednesday. Are we supposed to have plans for our story?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So I'd like you to think about like, what might you want to tell a story about? So so the first assignment is to tell, sorry, my brain is a little scattered here. You're going to tell a 5-minute story and you're going to tell it as a video, which can, could be like a voice recording of a slideshow, or like you just record a soundtrack with a blank screen if you wanted, or have some kind of animation, or just like film yourself talking, whatever you think works. And then, so you want to come up with an idea about like something you might want to tell a story about that will be shareable with the class and compressible to 5 minutes, at most 5 minutes. So it can be shorter than that. And then you want it to be like something compelling. So like saying like, I once drank coffee, and that's your whole story. Like that's not going to be interesting. But maybe there's some story there that could be interesting that you could unpack. So we'll like kind of probe your ideas. So on Wednesday, we'll kind of go around and each person will say, okay, I'm thinking of telling a story about coffee. And then my idea is once I drank coffee, and then someone will say, well, I don't know if that's super compelling. Like, could we unpack that a little bit? And then, it'll be a story, but it could be a made up story. It could be totally fiction. It could be about something in your life, someone else's life. The form that, the content and the form are totally up to you.
And we have to tie this to data. Is that right?
Nope, not for this
okay.
first assignment. Yeah, so so this is totally free form. So I don't want you to be constrained by thinking about data. Yeah, so you can check out also, I included links to some of the stories from last year. So if you want to get a sense from of like what people did last year, you could check those out. They ranged from like factual, kind of like documentary style things to like totally made up stories about like fictional lands and fantasy stuff. And they're all, yeah, any form is great and interesting. So
Awesome. I'm excited.
yeah. Cool. All right. Well, everyone good on what we're doing for Wednesday? All right. Okay. Nice to meet you all, and see you in class on Wednesday, if not before, during my office hours tomorrow. All right. Take care, everyone.